Welcome to the most significant research and news for creating your most beautiful, healthy life. We're going to review some of the latest research, and today one of the studies came up was regarding vitamin D and magnesium. And I want everybody to realize that these will be on NutriMostScience.com. You can watch them live on Facebook, NutriMost USA. Just like us at NutriMost USA, and you get a notification when they do go live, so that's a great thing to do. And just want to make a statement here that the information provided on this program is for educational purposes only. The statements made have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. By providing the information, we're not diagnosing, treating, curing, mitigating, or preventing any type of disease or medical condition. It's not intended as a substitute for professional advice of any kind, so please, before beginning any type of natural, integrative, or conventional treatment regime, it's advisable to seek the advice of a licensed healthcare provider. This is all educational, though. So, it's all about providing you the most significant research and news. And today, we're going to look at vitamin D and magnesium. And this is the actual study. As you see that it's from March 1st, it's the March 2018 issue of the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. And it's the role of magnesium in vitamin D activation and function. So I'm going to go through this with you, and you can see the abstract there. But there's a little bit more to it. One of the things that they make a statement is that when you're consuming vitamin D supplements, that one of the things, if you don't have enough magnesium, that there's going to be a problem. In fact, it can increase the amount of calcium and phosphate levels and still not be able to get your vitamin D levels up. So you still remain deficient in vitamin D because of the fact that without the magnesium, vitamin D really isn't useful because it's not being able to be used, and it may not even be safe. And just because your levels are still low, and you think, well, I need to take more vitamin D. I have to take more vitamin D to get my levels up. It turns out that is not the case, and the reason that's not the case is because of the fact that your body needs the magnesium, and without it, you can end up getting more calcium built up. The body has to try to get rid of the calcium. The way that it does it through the kidneys, and now what happens is you can develop more kidney stones. You can develop more vascular calcification and atherosclerosis. And I don't, the study was about the study was about magnesium, but I'll tell you this: it's not just magnesium; it's really vitamin K2, and the balance between magnesium and calcium, which should be pretty much a 1-to-1 balance, and it's usually closer to a 3 to 5, 3 to 1 or 3.5 to 1 balance. And so you really need to have magnesium. And the thing about magnesium is that the magnesium consumption has been much lower over the years. And you're going to blame the way that we basically, the industrialization of foods, and really the things that it's much lower in our diet. Now remember that magnesium is the fourth most abundant mineral in our body. So it's calcium, potassium, sodium, and then magnesium. And it's necessary for many reactions, many enzymatic reactions. And we know of it. It's found in a lot of different foods, including nuts and broccoli and the egg yolks. It's found in many different items, cheeses, mushrooms, basically. But the reality of it is something that's necessary. But I want to go over something before we do this, because one of the things, just see, where am I at here? I want to bring this up and just take you through vitamin D. And because one of the things is, we hear about vitamin D3, and the energy of the sun converts the LDL cholesterol to vitamin D3 sulfate. And that, by the way, that's another thing here. I want to go through the different types of vitamin. There's vitamin D. You'll hear vitamin D2. You'll hear vitamin D3. And it used to be the D2. They would have it in milk, for instance. But when you take typical supplements, most of the time they are unsulfated, where when it's from vitamin D3 from the sun is the sulfated type of vitamin D. And they are different. The vitamin D3 sulfate is water soluble. The unsulfated D3 is fat soluble. And when it's water soluble, it can easily go through the body and it can reach almost anywhere. When it's the fat soluble form, it has to be carried through the body, and it has to be carried through the body with the LDL cholesterol. So the things that you think are the bad cholesterol, and it really isn't at all times. And that's one of the things that I want to go through with this. The other thing is that the various types. So let's go through the metabolites of vitamin D. So it starts off with 7-dehydrocholesterol. That's provitamin D3. That's what's found in the lipids and the cell membranes. And that goes to cholecalciferol, which is previtamin D3, and that's what's photosynthesized in the skin, or you can get it from diet. You can get it in particularly the fish have a lot of the D3 in it. Or there's the ergocalciferol, and that's a previtamin D2. That's usually more plant-based in the diet. It's you can get that in mushrooms, for instance. And then it's converted to calcidiol. Both forms get converted to calcidiol, which is 25-hydroxyvitamin D, and calcitriol, which is 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D. And this is the way this works. It's converted primarily in the liver to the 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And then in the kidney to the 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D. And people say, well, which one should you look at from a blood test? And it's actually the 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And the reason is that the 125 is actually what is, that's what is the active form. Okay, that's really what's active. And people say, well, isn't that the form we would want to look at? Well, the thing is, it varies a lot. It's unstable. It's used right away. And so you want to look at the 25-hydroxyvitamin D in the actual bloodstream. And know that there is a difference between like D2, for instance. That is a 28-carbon vitamin, and the D3 is 27 carbons. So they are structurally a little bit different. And so the 25-hydroxyvitamin D, though, is going to be the best indicator. And one of the reasons is it has a half-life that's much longer than the 125 vitamin D3. So you want to use that 25. And the thing about this is when we take a look at this, let me just go back. And when we take a look at some of these things, the number one, vitamin D has been shown to be involved with, actually directly, out of the 30,000 genes in your body, you'll hear anywhere from 1,000 to 1,000 genes are directly affected by vitamin D. So what you're going to find out is it's really scratches the surface as far as what are the things that vitamin D is used for. In fact, some people think that there's even another, with the vitamin D sulfate, that there may be, because it's not just the D sulfate, the sun, the photosynthesis that's occurring. When I say photosynthesis, it's taking the bodies, it's not really photosynthesis. It's taking the photons of the sun and using that energy. It produces something called cholesterol sulfate and the vitamin D3 sulfate. And it can be, and that's one of the things that there's another issue, that it could be that if you're lacking sulfate or sulfur foods in your body, that can be a problem. But when you start to take a look at the amount of conditions that they say that vitamin D can help, I mean, you're looking at heart disease. We know heart failure. So many of the autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis has been shown. It has such a protective mechanism in that. And there is some strong evidence that is really due to a problem with with vitamin D. By the way, one of the things that vitamin D affects is the innate immune system of the body. And what that is That's the immune system inside the cell. There's actually something called the vitamin D nuclear receptor, the VDR. And a lot of times, and some people believe that that VDR, which is responsible for part of that innate immune system, that in autoimmune diseases, that's actually taken out and it's sort of broken. And that's one of the stuff with the things with molecular mimicry, where you have molecules that will mimic and you can basically take over that VDR, take over the vitamin D nuclear receptor. And so we take a look at that people who, you see there's a strong relationship between cancer, between diabetes, between the colds and flus and hypertension, Alzheimer's, depression, dementia is a huge thing with this. Schizophrenia, we see there's an issue with this. So it's not just your bones. There's so much more, because it's not just about, because we know that it affects calcium transport as well. And so let's take a look at what the optimal ranges are. And by the way, you'll see these ranges vary tremendously. And there's some really interesting things about vitamin D. And I'd like to go over them, and we could go forever. I mean, literally we can just have a show that goes all week long on vitamin D, because there's a lot of studies. There's studies that show, for instance, vegetarians that are not taking in as much, they're taking way less vitamin D than people who are eating lots of fish, and yet you'll see that they, on many of these cases, that their vitamin D levels in their body, they're actually circulating vitamin D, is much higher. You see people who have very low vitamin D levels, and when they continue to take more vitamin D, they can't get the vitamin D up. And there's reasons for that. Number one, there's reasons because you do need the magnesium, you do need vitamin K2, you do need the calcium. So there's process along with that. But what we also see is that people that are thinner have a lower BMI, tend to have better levels of vitamin D3. In fact, one of the things you'll see is when we put patients on our program that's for weight loss, and during that weight loss period is, even if their D3 levels, their D3 consumption or their vitamin D consumption decreases, their vitamin D levels circulating in the blood will actually increase. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is because it is fat soluble, it's stored in the fat. As that breaks down, it actually releases the vitamin D. The other thing that happens is that when you're taking in vitamin D, if you have more fat, it basically gets redistributed in that. So it takes more to bring that in. Now, let's take a look at how this works with the sun. First of all, it's the UVB rays that are going to affect this. And the UVB rays penetrate very, very shallow into the skin. They hardly make it through anywhere. And the darker pigment, the less it's able to penetrate. So that means that if you're dark-skinned, you're going to need longer exposure to the sun in order to get the amount of vitamin D that you need. Now, there's something that you need to know about that as well, and that is something that's called the azimuth of the sun. Because once you go past a certain angle, what happens is the UVB rays will actually bounce off the ozone layer of the protects the Earth. So you're not getting any of the UVB. In fact, during the wintertime, particularly if you're in the northern areas, you'll see a dramatic change with this. The other thing is that the higher your altitude is, that you'll notice that you're getting much more vitamin D. You're getting much more of those photons from the sun. And by the way, they found out, you have more heart attacks in the winter than you do in the summer. You have more heart attacks from people that are in low-lying areas than people who are in high-lying areas. So that all affects you. So what are the amounts? And this has gone, people have looked at this so much because some of the studies appear to be, took a wrong calculation. But I want to go that anything probably less than 50 nanograms per milliliter is you're probably deficient. I would say it's between that 50 to 100 is where you want, between 50 to maybe 90 area. But you need to have an optimal, I would say, between 50 and like 75. All right, so you need a higher amount of vitamin. But you want to measure it. You can become vitamin D toxic. By the way, if you become vitamin D toxic, it's very difficult to correct that. Okay, so those are issues with that. One of the things, I do not believe that you can become vitamin D toxic from with the sun. And by the way, sunburn is not good and doesn't help anybody. And you know, one of the things that I think that has really been detrimental when we come to vitamin D, because we know that it cuts your rate, for instance, if you start to look at the research on this, and how much it cuts the rate of various cancers, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, it is absolutely phenomenal how much it affects us. And because of the fact that doctors have scared us to stay away from the sun, and I will say this, the way the body is able to utilize photons, it is absolutely amazing, because what happens is the photons are critical, and I mean absolutely critical, to electrical transmission within the body, and it basically uses the DHA within the body, and and even to the point that not just the UVB, but the infrared, particularly at sunrise and sunset, because one of the things that the infrared does, particularly, is to help separate the water into hydrogen, oxygen, plus electrons. So we call it charge separation of water. And basically what that does is it creates a battery of life for the body. So this is very important. Now, I started to talk about something, and I got away from it a little bit, and that is that you have to have, there's the azimuth of the sun, and that's the angle. And it really starts to dramatically decrease once the azimuth gets below 45. And by the way, let me see if I have it. I use an app on my phone, and the app that I use on my phone is DMinder. And DMinder, let me just see if here's my DMinder. And if I put DMinder up, and it tells me that it will actually tell me that, like right now, the current angle is 41 degrees. So what that means is, after 40, you can get vitamin D as low as about 30 degrees, but between 30 to 45 degrees, you're hardly getting any vitamin D. And what it's telling me is that it's available for another 3 hours. Today, the most you're going to get at what's known as the solar noon, is going to be about 41.5 degrees today. So it's not even at 45 degrees. And today is March 1st. And so we're looking at, you probably won't get, let me just see if I can put this on here. Yeah, and you can go in and you can see these. You can put different things. It'll tell you how much vitamin D you get during the day. But that is an app called D, just the letter D, Minder, M-I-N-D-E-R. That's what I use to know. But I can tell you this, right now you're really not getting much vitamin D. Hey, another interesting thing. If it's cloudy, people say, do I get vitamin D? The answer is yes, you are getting vitamin D when it's cloudy. In fact, even when you're under shade, there's a study that showed that you can get 50% because of reflection when you're even if you're under shade. But where they did it at in a tropical area that had with the azimuth was like perfect. So there is some issue with that as well. But it's really that. Realize that vitamin D is absolutely critical, and I just want everybody to understand how that is. We can talk a lot more about vitamin D, and I'll get into some of that. But remember, and that's one of the reasons why, anything that we do with NutriMost, we're looking at all the various cofactors, the synergists, the active transporters, and anything that we do, and understanding what it is to optimize the cell. So I think it was is very interesting on like I said, on this one here, where they talk about the role of magnesium and vitamin D activation and function. And it talks about the fact that the magnesium assists in the activation of vitamin D, which is going to help regulate your calcium and your phosphate homeostasis to influence the growth and maintenance of bones. But it's not just bones. And by the way, the sulfate is not as actively involved with the regulation of the calcium sulfate, with the regulation of calcium. And it doesn't appear that it will cause you dysfunction when you're using when it's from the actual sun. And as I said, I do not believe that you can get vitamin D toxicity when you're getting it from the sun. So remember, you can visit us at NutriMostScience.com. That's www.NutriMostScience.com, where we have more information. Or you can visit us at NutriMost.com. And always remember to see our reviews at NutriMostReviews.com. And on Facebook, NutriMost USA, make sure you like us. We always stream there. We stream every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. and every Thursday at 12 noon. And these will all be located on the NutriMostScience.com for later review. And remember, this one is about the latest research, vitamin D and magnesium, and it came out in the March 2018 issue of the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. Excuse me.